Imagine the smell of smoke and coal lingering in the streets of a restless city. Imagine horse-drawn carriages clattering over uneven cobblestones, gas lamps burning with a faint hiss in the damp Chicago night. It is the late 1800s, and the world is changing. Skyscrapers are rising like titans of steel, the railroads stretching their iron veins across the continent, carrying men, women, and dreams to a place they believe promises hope and fortune. And yet, hidden in the shadows of this promise, a different story was unfolding. A story not of progress, but of horror. In 1893, Chicago became the proud host of the world's Columbian Exposition, a dazzling fairground of invention, light, and spectacle, designed to showcase human achievement. But only a few blocks away stood another construction, a strange building with endless hallways, hidden chambers, and doors that led to nowhere. The locals gave it a name whispered in fear: the Murder Castle. Inside, a man waited, a man whose smile charmed investors, whose voice seduced women, and whose mind was colder than any blade he wielded. His name was Herman Webster Mudgett. The world would come to know him by another, Dr. Henry Howard Holmes, and he was about to carve his legend into American history as its first notorious serial killer. But let us step back, away from a castle, away from Chicago. Let us journey instead to a small town in New Hampshire in the year 1861. A boy is born to Levi and Theodate Mudgett, a quiet, intelligent child, pale-skinned, with striking blue eyes that often seem to look past people, as if searching for something unseen. His name is Herman, and Herman, unlike other boys, is fascinated not by games or laughter, but by the anatomy of animals, by the idea of life and death. Reports tell us his father was a strict disciplinarian, a man who used alcohol and violence in equal measure. His mother, deeply religious, sought solace in prayer, sheltering Herman in a cocoon of fear and morality. The boy grew up in a house of silence punctured by shouting, in an environment where love was measured in obedience. Children whispered that young Herman was strange. They mocked him, bullied him. Some stories, perhaps embellished by time, claim that when local boys dragged him to a doctor's office one day, they forced him to confront a human skeleton. The children thought he would scream in terror. Instead, Herman reached out and touched the bones with quiet wonder. He was not afraid. He was fascinated. Notice how early this seed was planted. Not a fear of death, but a curiosity about it. And from curiosity, obsession is born. As Herman grew older, his intelligence became undeniable. He was ambitious, resourceful, and manipulative. He married young, fathering a child. But his ambition quickly pulled him away from family life. Herman wanted something more than the simplicity of rural existence. He wanted power, respect, control, so he pursued medicine, enrolling at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. Here, his fascination with death was given form and legitimacy. He studied anatomy, becoming skilled at dissection. But behind closed doors, Herman took advantage of his access to cadavers. He began a grim scheme, stealing corpses, mutilating them beyond recognition, and presenting them as accidental deaths to collect insurance payouts. To the world, he was a diligent medical student. In secret, he was learning how to turn death into profit. It is here that Herman Webster Mudgett begins to fade into shadow, and a new persona emerges. When he moves to Chicago years later, he adopts a new name, one that carries the sophistication of a gentleman, the authority of a doctor, and the charm of respectability. He calls himself Dr. Henry Howard Holmes, a man reborn. Chicago in the late 19th century was unlike any other city in America. The Great Fire of 1871 had leveled much of it. But from the ashes rose a new metropolis, hungry, ambitious, filled with opportunity. It was a city of noise, of railroads, of smoke-choked skies and crowded tenements. Immigrants arrived in waves, looking for work. Women flocked from the countryside, eager for jobs and independence. And soon, the city would host the grandest spectacle of its age, the World's Fair, a place where millions would gather, a place Holmes saw not with awe, but with calculation. Chicago was fertile ground for a predator, anonymous, crowded, full of strangers who could vanish without notice. For Holmes, it was perfect. He arrived in 1886, presenting himself as a polished, well-dressed doctor with a quick smile and persuasive words. He found work at a drugstore on the corner of Wallace and 63rd Street. The elderly owners admired his charm, and soon, Holmes was running the store. When the husband mysteriously disappeared, rumors began to spread. Holmes assured customers that the widow had simply sold the store and moved away. Few asked questions, but Holmes wasn't content to simply manage a pharmacy. He looked across the street at an empty lot, and in that lot, he saw the future. Not just a building, not just a business, a labyrinth. Construction began in 1887. Holmes presented the plans as a hotel and retail space, designed to accommodate visitors to the upcoming World's Fair. To the workers he hired, he was charming but mysterious. He paid them irregularly, often firing crews before they could complete their contracts. This constant rotation of laborers ensured that no single builder understood the entirety of the structure's design. What rose from the ground was 3 stories tall, a hulking brick building with confusing architecture and strange additions. To the casual observer, it was simply a large boarding house, but inside was something else entirely. Behind locked doors, Holmes oversaw the construction of hidden passageways, soundproof rooms, and staircases that led nowhere. Some rooms had gas pipes installed, allowing Holmes to suffocate occupants at will. Others were lined with iron plates, designed to be airtight chambers. There were trapdoors, secret chutes, and deep in the basement, the true heart of the castle, lay Holmes' workshop of death. Here, furnaces burned hot enough to reduce flesh to ash. Vats of quicklime stood ready to dissolve bone, and surgical tables waited under the flicker of gaslight. This was no hotel. This was a machine built for murder. Holmes was not a man of impulse, not a creature driven by momentary rage. His evil was colder, more calculated. Notice how each detail of the castle speaks not of chaos, but of design. He wanted not only to kill, but to control every step of the process. Holmes understood appearances. To the public, he was a successful doctor and businessman, a man of fine manners and tailored suits. Women found him magnetic. Investors found him persuasive. But in truth, he was an architect of deception. He spun lies with ease, creating false businesses, fake names, endless contracts. He thrived on manipulation, bending others to his will. And those who stepped into his orbit rarely walked away unscathed. Imagine the castle at night, the streets outside alive with the clatter of horse hooves, the distant whistle of trains, the laughter of men stumbling from saloons. And above it all, the looming brick structure with its many windows darkened. Inside, the hallways twist like veins, doors open into brick walls, and the gas lamps burn low. Somewhere in the shadows, Holmes walks, his footsteps echoing on the floorboards. He pauses outside a locked chamber. Inside, a victim waits, perhaps unaware of the fate that approaches. Holmes smiles faintly. He has all the time in the world. The castle has been built. The stage is set. And Chicago, in all its glory, is about to meet its devil. Chicago, 1892. The city breathes in smoke and exhales ambition. Streets are alive with motion, clattering trolleys, steam engines screaming from the rail yards, vendors calling out prices of fresh bread and fruit to hurried passersby. The world's Columbian Exposition is almost ready, a beacon rising by the lakefront, promising light, progress, and wonder. But several miles south, far from the clean white facades of the White City, another structure looms. 3 stories of dark brick and narrow windows, its outline heavy against the skyline of Englewood. Its upper floors promise rooms for weary travelers. Its street-level host shops, businesses, the illusion of prosperity. But the inside is something else. The castle. Step through the front door. The moment you cross the threshold, the ordinary dissolves into confusion. The floor creaks. The air smells faintly of plaster and varnish. Gas lamps flicker dimly, throwing long shadows across the walls. Hallways branch in unnatural directions, each turn designed to disorient. Some doors open into blank brick walls. Others swing outward, revealing staircases that rise, only to end at ceilings. There are rooms with no windows, no vents, suffocating in their silence. Some chambers have oddly slanted floors, as if the building itself warps around its hidden intent. Workers who had once constructed these spaces had whispered among themselves about the eccentricities of the design. Yet none had seen the entire blueprint. Holmes had ensured that. It is not a hotel. It is not a boarding house. It is a maze, a carefully engineered trap, a place where reality bends into nightmare. And beneath it, the basement waits, its brick walls cold and damp. Here, furnaces roar like the belly of some mechanical beast. Chemical vats bubble. A dissecting table gleams faintly in the low light. This is not simply a workshop. It is an abattoir. Imagine the sound of a lock clicking shut in one of those upstairs rooms. Imagine the echo as footsteps retreat, leaving only silence and the trapped heartbeat of someone who realizes too late that they are not safe. On the streets of Englewood, however, Dr. Henry Howard Holmes is the very picture of refinement. Tall, neatly dressed, always in press suits and a bowler hat, his mustache trimmed with care, Holmes exudes charm. His speech is deliberate, polished, never rushed. He carries himself as a man of authority, a doctor, a businessman, a trustworthy figure in a city hungry for progress. Women are drawn to him. His eyes linger just long enough to flatter. His words chosen with precision to seduce. He offers promises of work, of stability, of affection. And for many women, in a time where independence was still precarious, Holmes represents safety. But safety is an illusion. Holmes thrives on the vulnerability of others. He studies people the way a butcher studies livestock, evaluating not only their usefulness, but their weaknesses. To his investors, he is persuasive, spinning tales of profit. To his lovers, he is attentive, creating intimacy. To his victims, he is whatever they need him to be, until it is too late. The world's Columbian Exposition of 1893 is drawing near. Already, tens of thousands pour into Chicago, lodging scarce. Accommodations stretched thin. Holmes sees opportunity. His castle, positioned near the rail lines, becomes a lure for travelers and job seekers. Rooms available, the advertisements might say. Comfortable lodgings for visitors of the fair. But notice the brilliance of his design. He has created not just a place to kill, but a machine to feed his compulsion. The endless turnover of strangers means no one will notice when a boarder vanishes, a traveler from another state, a young woman seeking employment. If they disappear, who will look for them? Holmes does not simply kill for pleasure. He kills with efficiency. He kills with the confidence that Chicago itself will cover his tracks in its chaos. One by one, the castle claims lives. There is the young stenographer, lured by the promise of secretarial work. She enters the building with hope in her eyes, her suitcase clutched tightly, her future spread before her. Holmes greets her with warmth, leading her down the hallway. The floorboards creak, gas lamps sputter. The door closes behind her. There is the lover who believes herself cherished. Holmes whispers words of devotion, draws her into his confidence. He speaks of marriage, of shared futures. She believes him, but his eyes are cold, his smile calculated. Soon, she too vanishes, her absence explained away with forged letters and fabricated departures. There is a child, wide-eyed and trusting, coaxed by Holmes' fatherly demeanor. Innocence against a predator cloaked in charm. The castle devours them all, and the city, roaring with life and industry, barely notices. Holmes' methods vary. Sometimes it is gas, seeping silently through hidden pipes into airtight rooms, suffocating his victims as they pound helplessly against locked doors. Sometimes it is poison, slipped into medicine or drink. Other times, more direct, strangulation, knives, the cold efficiency of his medical training. The bodies are disposed of with equal precision. Some are burned in the furnace, their ashes carried away with the coal smoke. Others are stripped of flesh, their skeletons cleaned, articulated, and sold to medical schools eager for specimens. Still others are rendered into unrecognizable remains in vats of quicklime. Every method is clinical, calculated. To Holmes, human life is not sacred. It is raw material. Perhaps the darkest element of Holmes' crimes is not the violence itself, but the betrayal of trust. Consider this. Women arrived at his castle believing they were safe. Boarders thought they had found lodging. Employees believed they had found stable work. Lovers believed they had found a devoted man. Holmes wore masks not literal but social. A gentleman, a doctor, a husband, a businessman, and each mask concealed the predator beneath. Imagine the horror of realizing too late that the man you trusted, the man whose hand you held, whose promises you believed, was the architect of your death. That is the psychology of Holmes. He was not a killer who stalked strangers in the dark. He invited them in, and the castle was his accomplice. Picture the fair in the summer of 1893. The white city glows with electric light. The Ferris wheel towers against the sky. Music drifts across the lakefront. Visitors marvel at technological wonders, the telephone moving walkways, exotic exhibits from across the globe. It is a celebration of progress, a testament to humanity's triumph. And only a few blocks away, women disappear into the brick walls of the murder castle. Their laughter silenced, their future stolen. The smoke rising from Holmes' furnace carries a different story, one no fairgoer could ever imagine. This juxtaposition is not coincidence. It is irony sharpened to a knife's edge. For as the world celebrates the brilliance of man's achievements, Chicago hides within itself a reminder of man's darkest depths. Holmes' psychology reveals itself in the castle's design. Every hidden passage, every lock, every airtight room speaks to a man obsessed with dominance. He did not simply kill to eliminate. He killed to orchestrate. To him, the castle was not merely a building. It was an extension of himself, a theater of horror where he played both architect and executioner. Each victim was not a random choice, but an actor forced into a role he had written long before they entered the stage. And what did Holmes gain? Money, certainly, through insurance fraud, through the sale of skeletons. But deeper than profit was ego, control, the godlike power of deciding who would live and who would die, and of constructing an entire universe in which his will was absolute. It is said, power corrupts, but in Holmes, power did not corrupt. It defined him. Imagine standing in the hallway of the castle at night. The lamps flicker. The wallpaper is pale and peeling. Footsteps echo somewhere in the distance. Doors line the corridor, but you do not know where they lead. Some are locked, some open into nothingness. The air feels close, heavy with the scent of plaster and smoke. Somewhere, faintly, you hear the hiss of gas. Or is it only your imagination? In that moment, you realize the truth. The building itself feels alive. It breathes, and its lungs are filled with the screams of those who will never leave. Imagine being a young woman in the 1890s. The world is shifting beneath your feet. Industry is booming. Cities like Chicago glitter with promise. For the first time, women are stepping beyond the confines of rural homes and into urban life, seeking independence, work, adventure. The railroads can carry you anywhere. The World's Fair beckons, a palace of invention, a celebration of progress. But freedom carries risk. Behind every opportunity lies danger. Behind every promise, a hidden cost. And for some women, the cost was everything. They came to Chicago with hope in their hearts, their futures unwritten. And they stepped unknowingly into the castle of Henry Howard Holmes. They would never leave. Minnie Williams was petite, with soft features, her hair pinned neatly in the style of the time. She had inherited a small fortune, enough to give her comfort in a world where wealth often determined a woman's destiny. But Minnie longed for more than money. She longed for love, for belonging, for a man who would value her not for her inheritance, but for herself. And then she met Holmes. To Minnie, he seemed perfect. Tall, sophisticated, articulate. He spoke with the ease of a gentleman, his eyes full of warmth. He flattered her intelligence, encouraged her dreams. He made her feel seen. Soon, Minnie was captivated. Holmes whispered promises of a future together. He convinced her to sign over property in her name to him, cloaking the scheme in the language of love and trust. Minnie complied, blinded by his affection. But Minnie was not alone. She had a sister, Nanny, who came to visit. And Nanny's sharp eyes saw something Minnie did not. She mistrusted Holmes. Perhaps she voiced her suspicions. Perhaps she grew too close to the truth. The sisters were last seen alive together, entering Holmes' castle. After that, they vanished. Their bodies were never recovered. Holmes' explanation was coldly efficient. He told acquaintances that Minnie and Nanny had returned home. He even produced forged letters to prove it. But behind the castle's walls, the truth lingered in silence. Notice the psychology here. Holmes did not simply kill strangers. He lured women into intimacy, into trust. He made himself indispensable, the center of their world. And once he had their devotion, their money, their faith, he took everything, including their lives. Julia Connor's story begins with an affair. She was married with a young daughter, yet her marriage was faltering. When she crossed paths with Holmes, his charm overwhelmed her. He became her escape, her passion, her hope for something more. Julia worked in Holmes' pharmacy, and soon their relationship deepened. But unlike many of Holmes' flings, Julia was not naive. She was confident, bold, even demanding. She wanted more from Holmes than stolen moments. She wanted marriage. By Christmas of 1891, Julia gave Holmes an ultimatum: marry her or she would leave. Holmes agreed, but Julia was never seen again. Witnesses recall that Julia and her daughter Pearl disappeared suddenly, with Holmes claiming they had traveled away. The truth was darker. It is believed Holmes used one of his airtight, gas-filled rooms to kill them both. Their bodies, like so many others, likely reduced to ash in a castle's furnace. Pearl was only 6 years old. Pause here. Imagine the cruelty. Julia's longing for love, Pearl's innocent trust, both extinguished, not in an act of passion or rage, but with methodical, calculated detachment. This is the chilling hallmark of Holmes. To him, life was currency, and Julia and Pearl had outlived their usefulness. Emmeline Sigrand was 24, a striking young woman with ambition and wit. She came to work as Holmes' secretary, and like so many before her, she found herself drawn into his orbit. He flattered her, dazzled her with talk of marriage, of building a future together. Friends noted her excitement. She spoke of wedding plans, of happiness at last. But one day she vanished. Holmes explained that Emmeline had left suddenly, running away with another man. It was a story he had used before, and one he would use again. But behind the castle's walls, Emmeline's fate was sealed. Some speculate that her body was disposed of in quicklime. Her skeleton later sold to a medical institution. A grim profit from a stolen life. Think of Emmeline's final moments. Imagine stepping into a room with the man you love, trusting him completely. Imagine the sound of the lock behind you, the hiss of gas filling the air, the sudden realization that the person you thought would protect you is the architect of your death. That is the horror of Holmes, not the violence itself, but the betrayal of intimacy. Holmes' victims followed a pattern. They were often women, young, ambitious, and alone in the city. He offered them employment, stability, affection. He became the solution to their struggles. And once they depended on him, emotionally, financially, socially, he had them. Notice the clinical repetition. Holmes was not improvising. He was refining. Each relationship, each disappearance, was part of an evolving system. A predator perfecting his art. To Holmes, people were not individuals. They were assets. Women were tools for pleasure, property, and profit. Their deaths were not accidents of rage, but premeditated steps in his grand design. And yet, Chicago did not notice. In a city teeming with immigrants, with millions passing through for the fair, disappearance was not uncommon. Letters were lost, addresses changed, people vanished into the anonymity of urban life. Holmes exploited this indifference. He forged letters in his victims' handwriting, sending them to family members with fabricated stories of sudden travel. He spun tales of marriages abroad, of new adventures elsewhere, and the families, distant, uncertain, bound by the limits of communication in the 1890s, accepted the lies. The silence of the city became Holmes' greatest accomplice. What is most unsettling about Holmes' victims is not merely that he killed them, but that he made them love him first. He did not lurk in alleys, a faceless figure in the night. He looked into their eyes, spoke their names, held their hands. He created futures with them, futures he never intended to honor. This is the psychology of the sociopath at its most insidious. Holmes did not kill strangers. He killed those who trusted him most. Love, to Holmes, was never about connection. It was about leverage. Imagine Minnie Williams walking the halls of the castle, her footsteps echoing softly as she carries documents Holmes asked her to deliver. Imagine Julia Connor tucking her daughter Pearl into bed in one of the boarding rooms, unaware that the walls themselves are her enemy. Imagine Emmeline Sigrand smiling at Holmes, believing she is on the cusp of a new life. The castle watches. The castle waits. Every lock, every corridor, every hidden chute exists for one purpose: to turn trust into terror. And once the door closes, there is no way out. Holmes' body count will never be known with certainty. Some say 20, others nearly 200. Many victims left no trace, their remains obliterated by fire and acid, their names lost in time, their families left with unanswered questions. But what matters is not the number. It is the method, the cruelty, the intimacy of betrayal. Holmes was not content to simply kill. He orchestrated, he deceived, he controlled, and in his castle, each disappearance added another brick to his legend. But even the most intricate lies begin to fray. Even the most elaborate castle cannot stand forever. As Holmes' web of deceit grows larger, so too does the suspicion. And soon, the city will begin to ask questions. Questions Holmes cannot answer. The walls of the castle will not keep its secrets forever.